All right, Bigfoot Society. I've got the privilege of talking to a new friend, Chris, from Indiana area. That's where he's been having some interesting things going on out there. Chris is an herbalist and also an outdoorsman. So he's getting into the state parks out there in the state of Indiana and has had some interesting things happen. So welcome to the show, Chris. How are you doing today, sir?
Absolutely. Give thanks, good brother. Everything has been wonderful today. Just soaking up this unusually, unseasonably warm weather here for us in the Midwest, man. So, yeah, just getting out there, getting the boots on the ground and doing some good hiking, harvesting up some late season medicines. And yeah, just overall enjoying life right now, man. It's really been an adventure over the past year.
I love that. Such a great outlook. I mean, it has been a really nice time in the Midwest, actually. And we're just about to get into the winter. I think we're going to get some snow maybe later this week, but we'll see what that brings for you. But Chris, you mentioned when you signed up some really interesting areas in Indiana that I've been to myself and have come up on the show lately. So I'm really interested to hear what you have been experiencing in these areas when you're out, trying to find herbs and just enjoying the outdoors. So, feel free to take us back when really this journey started for you, when it started intersecting with Bigfoot.
Right on, man. Well, according to myself, I've always been an avid fan of the Bigfoot or Sasquatch phenomena, if you would say. I've had a few paranormal experiences in my lifetime growing up. I lived in I guess what you would call a haunted house for a period of my life. I never had any experiences myself, but a lot of activity was centered around my bedroom and stuff like that. So, anyways, I've always just been an avid outdoorsman. I like to fish a lot. Used to hunt back in the day as well, and I just like to get out on the parks and really just forage for the different mushrooms and the different medicines. I'm really well cultured. I've done some traveling in my time. 2011, I went to college in North Miami, Florida, at Johnson& Wales University for culinary arts. So kind of a big steer away from where I'm at in my life now, but I was down in Miami for some time, Southern California, Washington State. My aunt and my uncle, they stay up in the Tri-Cities area, right outside of Kennewick. So I spent some time up there, and then I also spent some time in Alaska. I spent about a 6 or 7 month stint in Alaska. I worked on the docks out there, so that was a really wonderful experience as well. And then somehow, some way, I found myself back to the Midwest here in the good old Gary, Indiana. That's where I reside at the moment. I'm kind of a regionite. I grew up in the region around here in Northwest Indiana. So this is kind of my dwellings. And I guess when it comes to the Sasquatch phenomena around here, I really didn't think that it was possible for something to exist around here. But I have come across some recent information about Indiana Dunes National Park, which just got the term deemed national park as of the past 2 years. So Indiana Dunes National Park supposedly has a couple of sightings and/or experiences when it comes to footprints and tree structures and stuff like that. I myself have not encountered anything out there, but nonetheless, I still find it interesting that this part of the state, I guess from Porter County, Lake County, into LaPorte County, and pushing further towards South Bend or even the New Buffalo, just on the Michigan-Indiana line. Tends to award some pretty good activity up that way as of recent. So, yeah, man, that's pretty much how I got started into all this. Was just by being, I guess, a fan of it, and then having some experiences later in my life.
It was extremely interesting to hear about Indiana Dunes State Park. If you look on a map, we were talking about the Bigfoot Society map earlier before we started, and it was nice to hear from someone that they use it and they enjoy it. So I appreciate that. But it does make sense because I do have some reports I've taken from southern Chicago, and then you've got the Manistee National Forest over in Michigan. So it makes sense that there could be that little corridor going around the bottom of Lake Michigan, and Indiana Dunes State Park would put that right there. So, are these friends that you've heard this information from, or where have you been hearing this from?
This is stuff that I've seen on, and I take everything with a grain of salt. You know, I try to keep a very open mind and open perspective, especially to people's word and things that you read on the internet nowadays. This particular one came from Reddit. A guy was talking about he was hiking off trail. You know, and I came across this while I was searching for primitive campsites down in Morgan-Monroe State Forest. So that's how I came across this information about the footprints found in in the Indiana Dunes National Park. So Reddit was a provider of that for me. A guy was hiking off trail and one of the trails down there in the national park and came across some pretty good sized footprints in sort of like the boggy areas that could come up within the sandy dunes and stuff like that. So somebody found that there supposedly along with some tree structures. But what makes me, just kind of hesitant or skeptical to give a thumbs up to reports coming out of Indiana Dunes National Park is that there's a lot of pranksters in the world. And I remember a few years ago when the Finding Bigfoot show came out, they did an episode up here in the Indiana Dunes National Park. And I remember the video that came out, and it just looked like some guy was scaring his kids out in the woods. His children were in the car, and the family or the mother, whoever was in the car with the kids, was like, "Oh, look, there it is off in the woodlines," and it just looked like some guy, rocking back and forth, and maybe one of the generic
Right.
monkey suits and stuff like that. So, people say that it was credible, but if you're a very discernful person, I think you'll be able to decipher a lot of fact from fiction out there, um, and keep an open mind as well. But nonetheless, that's why I'm hesitant to really give a thumbs up, even though as of let me see, I went out hiking yesterday with a brethren of mine, right over here in an offshoot of the national park. It's so the national park is in a place called Chesterton, Indiana, and where we were hiking was a place called Porter, Indiana, which is just before that. And there's a ranger station right there, and we usually find a lot of mushrooms out there. We find huge bounties of chicken of the woods and hen of the woods, and just a lot of good stuff over there overall. But we were hiking one of the branches of the Calumet Trail out there, and it runs right along the Calumet River. And we came to a portion, kind of in the backwoods parts of it, where there was maybe about a 12 to 15-foot tree. It looked kind of old, but it still had flexibility to it, and it looked like it was bent over in an arch shape, right? And I believe the arch was about 8 foot across, is what we had measured it at, about 8 foot arch that there was. And what was very interesting, which made us really look, I guess, a little more specific at this tree arch, was that there was like a fork in the tree, right, like a Y, and the top portion of it was tucked into this other tree. That so if you can imagine a field goal, right? It was tucked into
Yep.
there to where the bottom branch was bent towards the ground and the other part was there bracing it in between like a little notch in the tree, right? And that's what really, kind of floored us, and we were just very excited to find something like that. Although we don't jump to conclusion all the time, it was just nice to see some anomalous things out in the bush like that. And that was really well. We did come across what appeared to be some type of footprints, but it's kind of hard to discern that in some of the boggy, swampier areas along the Calumet River right there. We found what appeared to be two of them, pretty large. We didn't take measurements of them because they was just a little bit, you know, um, not so profound. But nonetheless, it was still interesting to see that stuff out there. And what I'd like to give thanks for you and what I found, listening through this show is that there seems to be um, times where you don't see anything when you're not aware of this subject. You know what I mean? But the moment you become
Absolutely.
aware of the different findings or what to look for in the bush, I guess I would say, is when you really start to see these things that should be so evident to us. You know what I mean? Some of these things have been right in front of us, and we just ignore them, maybe because our mind doesn't want to accept them or deal with it, or because we just don't have a frame of reference, right? We see a bent tree and we think, somebody was hanging on the tree or something. That's just the average response or the average thought. But it's just very interesting, and I give thanks for guys like yourself providing a platform that's allowing this information and I guess you call it evidence to be put out there for us to utilize when we go out into the bush. I was never actively looking for this stuff until recently, till I had my encounters. But just being out there now, I know the things to look for, and I know not to jump to conclusion right away because usually there's a natural explanation to things, right? 90% of the time, according to me, there is a natural explanation for things. But then that 10% is that realm of the unknown, and we always got to keep an open mind, man.
Oh, I agree with you. And first, thank you for the kind words. And also, the how you explained that that tree being held down. Um, I've seen that in Oregon, out in the Willamette National Forest,
Wow.
and in the Oak Ridge area around Oak Ridge. And when you see stuff like that, it really makes you take notice because that didn't just happen by itself. I mean, something was like, all right, hold this down, that's how it works. And this area, the Indiana Dunes, have you talked to the rangers at all? You were mentioning that there are some rangers in that park.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't spoken to any rangers just because I don't know. At least for me, they don't seem like the type of people that would be so inclined to speak about that stuff. Usually, they're more research and science based. If you brought some of the, I guess you would call it the woo stuff up to them, I don't think that they would acknowledge it. But I'll take your advice if that's what you're giving to go ahead and talk with some of these rangers out there as I cross paths with them in the near future.
Well, and it's something where you can take it a few ways, right? You can jump right into the, hey, you seen Bigfoot around here? If you're wanting to go down that road, or another way to do that is like, hey, have you seen anything weird around here? Like, I've been noticing some things out in the woods. Has anyone else, or have you guys seen stuff like that? Sometimes that approach can lead to some interesting conversations. It has for me out in the Pacific Northwest, out in the Midwest. I'm in Iowa. Not a lot, but it's always worth checking. Actually, no, I take that back. It does work. I just can't really say where. It does work, though. Do it.
Gotcha, good
So,
brother.
anyways, so you mentioned an area that's come up a few different times lately, Morgan-Monroe State Park, and there has been a lot of activity reported. I mean, just to me, down in that area, and this is south of Indianapolis. I mean, because you've got Yellowwood State Forest, Morgan-Monroe, and then what's the other one? Brown County State Park. I believe all of those areas are having activity currently. So you had some experiences down there in Morgan-Monroe.
I've been excited to share this one as it's a very recent encounter. It happened. It happened. I shouldn't say encounter. I should say experience rather. But this happened back on October 17th and 18th. So I went with three friends of mine, or excuse me, two friends of mine, my friend Wood and our lady friend Ja, and we went down on October the 17th. We left in the morning time to head down to Morgan-Monroe State Forest. We were gonna go scout it out and figure out. I went down on October 17th and 18th and left the 19th. This was the weekend of October 17th, 18th, and 19th that I just said. But I went down there with two friends of mine, my friend Wood and my friend Ja. And, I always like to, when I go places, now that I'm a little bit more inclined to be looking for the Sasquatch phenomena, if you would say, I'm more inclined to bring some spiritual people as, I don't know if you want to call it bait or placebo or maybe some type of attraction. But I just
Right.
think that ups the ante. You know what I mean? So yeah, we went down there on October the 17th, and it was the first time we ever been to a big state forest like this, or anywhere past Indianapolis to do some hiking or camping. So got down there on the 17th in the afternoon, about 1, 2 o'clock. We scouted it out. We figured that we were gonna wind up camping at Mason Ridge Campground, which is just before Scout Ridge. Now I heard Scout Ridge Campground. I think it was from episode 953 of the guy in Indiana. He was talking about some of the spots in Morgan-Monroe and that maybe he had a friend of his that would frequent back to Scout Ridge because of the amount of activity. It's a little more secluded. It seems to be, I guess, what they call like a scout camp or boys camp or something like that. where they got pavilion, maybe some picnic benches and stuff. It's a little bit more set up. Nonetheless, we wound up setting up at Mason Ridge Campground. It was pretty sparse out that day. There was maybe about six other campers throughout the campground, and yeah, we set up camp and did a little bit of hiking around the Cherry Lake area. Found some nice geodes. I actually got a nice little geode right here. This is a nice quartz crystal right here.
Nice. Oh,
Yeah,
quartz. Nice.
yeah, absolutely. A nice milky quartz. So nonetheless, beautiful find out there. Supposedly you could find other gemstones. And I guess a nice correlation, I guess I would put with the Sasquatch phenomena is that, or even just paranormal in general, it seems like where there's heightened quartz deposits or mineral deposit, there seems to be a lot more activity. Am I right?
Yeah. Oh, you're 100% right, my man. Yep. You got it, Chris.
Right on. So, yeah, we found these right off a little gully next to our campground in Mason Ridge. So, anyways, we decided to do that hiking at Cherry Lake, and we didn't notice anything anomalous out there. It was just pretty cool to get out in such a vast area. You know what I mean? Such a desolate place where you very rarely encounter people, especially if you're on the outskirts of the trail, or if you're just on some of the more outback trails, or I guess they call them backcountry. Um, so we didn't experience anything that first day really compelling, but at nighttime we did do a night hike, right? So me and my guy Wood, we did a night hike on the back end of the Mason Ridge campground. There's like a little, I don't know if it's a fire trail or a trail that just goes off, a hunter's trail maybe, but it goes off for some miles, and we didn't try the whole thing. We went about a half a mile in as it was dark and stuff like that. It was getting pretty late. It's probably about 11 or 12 o'clock, and we heard some barred owls and stuff like that, and sometimes I guess in the fall time you get a little bit spooked when you hear like the squirrels and the raccoons and stuff hopping around. I remember we clicked on our red lights at one time, and we had some eye shine right in front of us, and we both jumped, and we jumped on to the regular light, and there was a possum hanging from the tree. So it goes to show
Oh,
you
man.
that you'll definitely see some animals out there, but you won't see them as frequently as you would think. I guess a misconception that people think about Indiana or just being in the woods in general is that anywhere you go, you're automatically going to see wildlife, and that was the exact opposite for being down in Morgan-Monroe. We've seen the occasional bird, but we rarely seen squirrels. We rarely seen raccoons. No deer. That one particular possum. So it's very, very quiet and desolate out there, and it was just interesting to feel that difference in location as compared to where I'm at up here by the dunes. So, anyways, the first day didn't ward anything, but we decided to hike to Prather Lake because I heard once again on Bigfoot Society, one of the earlier podcasts, that there was a gentleman that was doing some camping or some frequenting through Morgan Monroe, and he brought up Prather Lake and how it was a lost or a hidden lake that's just way back in the bush, and you could see when you hike the trail to get there, you could see why it's so desolate. But we decided to hike that one on Saturday, which was October the 18th, and we got up there about 11:30 in the afternoon, and we drove down this road called Rosenbaum Road. You got to drive down this old um, gravel road, and I had to drop my Trailblazer in the four-wheel drive because there was some treacherous roads right there, right? So we were going down some steep inclines and stuff, and we wound up traveling down Rosenbaum Road, made it to the old fire road that was fortunately open at this time of year. Usually it's closed. Um, but we were fortunate to find it open. And so we traveled up that road into this parking lot, right? So there's this gravel parking lot after you get up in there. And nobody was there when we pulled in, right? There was no trucks, no cars, no signs of anybody being in there. But what I found interesting, man, was that there was this log set up just off to the side of the parking lot, maybe a fallen deadwood or something like that. And there was four apples lined up on the log. So I don't know if people were doing some gifting or something like that up there in this particular parking lot at the Prather Lake Trailhead. But we decided to, leave a couple of things as well. I left some small jade beads, green jade beads from a bracelet of mine that I left inside of this little notch or this little hole that came off from a branch of the tree. Never got back to the parking lot to check that out, but I'm planning to go back here in the wintertime to investigate some more. So, anyways, we started hiking this trail, that we thought was the trail to Prather Lake, right? Obviously, we took the wrong trail. We were supposed to go through the gated spot, and I'm giving this information, I'm making it public so that people, don't get lost and have to go through the backcountry like we did. But make sure you go through the gate that's blocking the road. That's a 1 mile trot all the way down to Prather Lake. And that's the way you want to go. We wound up taking a trail right off of the parking lot, and we started hiking in, and it was just beautiful. Everything just opened up, beautiful canopy. It was the fall time, so the colors were starting to change and really pop. And like I said, very quiet out there. And we wound up getting about maybe a little less than a quarter mile in, right? And just to the right of the trail, man, we came across this very anomalous, what looked like a tree structure, or what they call a tree structure. So it looked like a bunch of trees just forming intersecting cross sections or X's within the tree right off of the trail. And some of these trees, some of these logs were pretty thick, maybe I don't know. I'm trying to think of maybe a good measurement for it. Maybe between 6 and 10 inches. Where I guess 10 would be the maximum for the circumference of the tree trunk. But nonetheless, they were stashed in some of these nooks and crannies of the tree that just it looked like you had to force these trees in there, or you had to maneuver them or position them some type of way to get them into these particular spots. And like I said, I always try to be the man that's going to rationalize something. There's a rational explanation for everything, right? Maybe this is not a street structure. Let's try to eliminate the obvious. And so some of these trees appeared to be, some deadfall that were taken from another area. They didn't come from any of the surrounding trees. Didn't look like they broke off of any trees above us or around us. So it's just very anomalous, man. And it was right on the edge of this ridge, because on the other side of the trail, it just went down. So that was very anomalous that we seen as well. We didn't feel creeped out or anything like that. We just investigated and tried to rationalize the best we could. So we continued to trot, and it started getting like an hour and a half into the trot, and we're like, damn, where's the lake, man? This is called Lost Lake or Hidden Lake for a reason. We can't find it. So we wound up getting to the end of this trail, and it branched off into two ways. There's a tree stand. And this for anybody who goes down this particular road. There's a tree stand off to your left when you come to the fork in the trail. You can go left, which looks like it's maybe a logging road, if you would call it that, or some type of service road where people are coming up to log, because Morgan-Monroe State Forest is a place where people can gather permits to come log it, right? It's a logging forest. So you can go in there and cut your own trees for whatever purpose. So we came into this clearing right at this fork off to the right of the trail that was a bunch of cut trees. So we had to hike through this rugged terrain and all these fallen trees and such, to start getting back to somewhat of a path towards the lake. And fortunately, I was able to showcase my navigating skills, man, and get us there without a map and stuff like that. Just being able to use some intuition and some, I guess, navigating skills through the bush to get us to the lake. But on the trot there's such changes in elevation. We're going up and down, and it's very rugged. If you've been out there, Jeremiah, I'm sure you know how rugged the terrain can be out there on some of these trails. It's a lot of ups and downs, and just a lot of rough terrain. So we wound up coming down this, I guess, logging trail where it was marked by these pink flag sticks, and we started winding through this, and it didn't really lead us anywhere except for down into this gully, where it looks like they might have been doing some logging a while back. And I came across something weird. I guess you can kind of attribute it to human activity, but there was this turtle shell that was just sitting on top of this log, and it wasn't like the turtle was just gutted out to where the whole shell was still intact. It was just the top part of the shell. It looked like something had maybe ripped the bottom portion of it off, or something. But it was sitting on top of this huge tree stump, man. This huge tree stump was just sitting right on top. And I didn't really know what to make of it. Like I said, I didn't feel anything weird, any weird feelings. The forest didn't go silent or anything like that. But it was just one of those another anomalous things to log in the book of happenings, right? So,
Absolutely.
right, absolutely. It was very, very strange, kind of out of place. So, whatever you want to attribute that to, so be it. But we continued back on the trot and just pushed our way through the bush, and finally made it down to the old Prather Lake, the hidden lake or the lost lake, man. It was just a very beautiful spot to see. We came in from the backside of it because we had to trot, a mile and a half, 2 miles from from the backcountry where we got off trail, if you want to call it. And it was just a beautiful view from that backside. It really brought me back to the to the gentleman that was telling the story about he was down there with his children, and they had a dog down there or something like that, and they trotted in from the fire road, and I guess they were doing some fishing or something like that, and they heard what they thought was tree knocks and some other strange things happening. It really spooked them, and they wanted. I guess the dog. Maybe you remember in the story, but the dog took off. They had a little small dog. The dog took off and was like scouting the bush and stuff like that, and came running back, yipping, and was hiding, in between the guy's legs and stuff like that. So it was a very interesting encounter by this gentleman and his youth, and we just happened to be on the opposite side of the lake um,
Okay.
from where they were. And on that side of the lake that he was on, I mean, the ridges just go straight up as soon as you get, if we were to cross the lake and get right to that ridge, it just goes straight up. So it's very steep terrain right there. And on the side that we were coming in from, it was pretty flat, a little bit boggy and stuff like that. And we didn't notice anything anomalous over there. We checked it out, starting to get about 1:30, 1:45, pushing 2 o'clock. We was anticipating some thunderstorms coming in that week, so we decided, yeah, we'll trot around and harvest up some different herbs that we were finding around the way, some good medicines. So we wound up calling it an early day, trotting back up that fire trail. We found it fortunately, and we started trotting back up that trail. Really rough terrain getting out of there. So we started trotting back, and it got to be about 2:30 in the 2:30 in the afternoon, and it was kind of overcast skies. A little bit of sunlight peeking through. Very still outside. There wasn't much wind activity, nor animal activity either. And it's about 2:30, and we trotted about three-quarters of the mile back. I checked the phone. We got about 20-minute trot to the parking lot, back to the parking lot there. And we come out of the canopy, right? So the canopy is all the trees covering us, and we finally come out of the canopy to where the trees let up. And we've been hearing, squirrels and stuff throughout the day. We was really getting our ears in tune for the sounds of the bush, right? So that we're not mistaken for certain things. So we're familiar with the squirrel sounds. Black walnuts are falling all the time at this time of year, so we're just constantly hearing them fall and hitting leaves and hitting woods and stuff like that. So you could kind of pick out the sounds and know what it's sounding like when these things occur. But we come out of this canopy, man, and just off to the left of us, there's a grassy berm, and then on the other side of the berm, it goes straight down into the bush, one of those cliffs again. And as soon as we walked out of that, man, we're very quiet. We're not expecting anything. We're coming to the end of our trot, you know what I mean? And we're just looking to get out of there and go spark a fire and have some dinner. And all of a sudden, man, you could hear what sounded like a rock, man. And I'm thinking maybe about this size. That's why I brought this thing up here for reference. We didn't see a rock as we didn't stick around long enough, but something maybe this size, man. I don't know if you'd say this is about softball size, right? So
Oh yeah.
something about softball size, right? What sounded like came through the tall grass. And if you've ever thrown something, a ball or a rock, or if you've ever heard something go through the dead tall grass, the brown grass, right? Um, it makes a particular noise, almost like a shimmering noise, like a shh, going through the bush right there. And something came through there, man. It sounded like it was airborne, right? And came through there at what I estimated was, I guess, would be off to my 8 to 9 o'clock position. So off to my left side, came from my 8 to 9 o'clock position, potentially over that ridge, but it came through the tall grass and hit another rock. And that sound is so familiar. I mean, rocks clacking together is a very particular sound that stands out, man. And if that's what it was, it came through the bush and it hit the rock and it startled all of us. I didn't, and so me being who I am, I don't want to spook the people behind me. I don't want to be the placebo that's going to get somebody to answer the same way I answered based upon my perspective, right? So I look back at them and everybody's like, "Yeah, did you guys hear that?" And we stayed quiet. We was kind of whispering when we said it, but yeah, did you guys hear that? And we all shook our head, yeah. And they originally said it sounded like a rock hitting a rock, and automatically it clicked with my head because that was my immediate inference. And
Hmm.
so we stopped, we listened, we didn't hear any motion. Immediately, I'm looking up, I'm thinking, man, this has to be a black walnut. This has to be a tree limb breaking off or something like that. Something rational, man. Maybe something shifted in the sand. Maybe a squirrel kicked something, but this sounded like something had to have had thumbs to throw something, man. You know, I'm pretty, like I said, I'm very rational guy, so I'm not looking to automatically say something is woo or something is of paranormal. I'm looking for the rational explanation, and that I could not find in the moment. There was no black walnut trees on top of us. I don't think a squirrel would have threw a black walnut at me, nor threw a black walnut in general. Um, and who would have thrown a rock? I mean, this soil has maybe smaller rocks in it. It's kind of like your harder clay soil and stuff like that. There's a little bit of leaf litter on the ground as well, but we weren't seeing large rocks like that. Even trotting through the backcountry like that, there was no large rocks or anything. So we stopped for a second. We paused for about 2 minutes, didn't hear anything, and we slowly creeped around. I was in the front of the pack, right? So I slowly trotted around, went up, kind of did a little curve off to the left to about my 10 o'clock position, right around the backside of that berm, and didn't see anything. And me just listening to the podcasts in the past, people are always talking about, the spider position, right? Things are crawling and stuff like that. And, we're never looking at the ground. We're always thinking, oh, it's going to be a 8, the 10-foot tall creature or individual, and we're going to be looking up for something. And so I'm looking around, I'm not seeing anything. And a big boom of thunder comes in and spooked us again. You know what I mean?
Oh man.
We're already on edge, man. And me, I gotta laugh at myself because I'm always proud of myself on being the tough guy. You know what I mean? That hey, nothing's gonna scare me. I gotta be able to, take care of everybody behind me. The caretaker in a sense. And
Right.
it startled me. That really humbled me. So nonetheless, we didn't hear anything, but we continued to walk out and got back to the parking lot, jumped back in the vehicle, headed back to camp, and we were just trying to make sense of this. You know what I mean? We didn't. I should have said this before. I find it unfortunate that these things happen when I go out with other people that are under my supervision. You know what I mean? So I got to look out for individuals that are not out there for that particular experience in a sense. So I didn't want to stick around. Me and my guy we would have stuck around, for the next hour or so, and even pushed through the rain just to do some more investigation. But we had a lady with us, and we didn't know how geared she was for that. So we tried to back out, unfortunately, and got back to the parking lot, set up camp, or excuse me, set up for a meal, got the fire going. Rain started coming in, and we wound up laying down pretty early, about 10, 11 o'clock in the nighttime. And before we were laying it down, we heard in the middle of the rain, in the middle of the night, like I said, pushing 11, 12 o'clock, what sounded like shotgun blasts in the distance. And I'm thinking to myself, who's shooting off shotguns, to what would have been maybe my 1 o'clock position and my 11 o'clock. That's what it sounded like to me. Who's shooting off shotgun at, 11, 12 o'clock at night during a rainstorm? That really didn't add up. I know that maybe people could have been out there hunting coyote or coyote, man. You know what I mean? But I'm not familiar with people that are doing that at 11, 12 o'clock at night. So it
Right.
sounded like a gunshot in the distance. If I had to guess between a half a mile and a mile away, a mile might be pushing it because I could still really hear the blast from it, if that's what you want to call it. So I'd have to say about a half a mile away in the distance, and they came from opposite sides of each other. So do you say that is your supposed wood knock? I'm not sure. What about you, Jeremiah? Have you ever heard people talking about what sounds like gunshots comparing to wood knocks, or do people
I
hunt
mean,
at that time of night?
that is something that I'm thinking of my own first experience in Iowa. People that aren't used to hearing something like that, they'll usually say it. I think what I said was, I was like, why are there fireworks out here? It's not fireworks. It's just like a crazy wood knock. Or like a gunshot is another great example. The time of night that it happened, you're right. It really doesn't make sense that it was, someone hunting at midnight. That's weird, right? So take into account the area you're in and what you know about the area and what other people have experienced. There's been At least we know of, I think, two different people that have been talking about this forest. I know there's many, many other people that have had things happen in there. I just haven't. I'm actually talking to one of them after this.
Right on.
I'm talking to
Right on,
another
Jeremiah.
Indiana guy after this. I just realized that.
Right
So
on, brother.
that's pretty funny. But yeah, that's man. Is this an area where you're thinking of spending a lot of more time in the future, or maybe going back with a smaller group that would be in it for the long haul to investigate stuff?
Absolutely, and I'm willing to go out by myself if necessary. I'm not one that's not keen to going off by himself and doing a hike by himself or doing some setup camp, solo camp for a weekend or something like that. I'm just fine with doing that, and I'm not looking to really expose anything from by curiosity. You know what I mean? It's more so for my research only and to share with fellow researchers. You know what I mean? Just to get more of an understanding of what we're dealing with, because this is not something that is, I guess, recognized or noticed by science, by the scientific
Hmm.
community. In a
Right.
sense, there's no tangible evidence, if you want to say that. But I definitely look to go out to this particular area. I want to go down to Hoosier National Forest or Yellowwood and stuff like that. But I heard
Yeah.
that Morgan-Monroe is where the hot spot is, and I could definitely see why. Um, and it's just a very interesting area. There's so many places to get into the backwoods areas, and if you talk to people or do some research around, people will talk about the many different areas in there where they're having activity and stuff like that. And Prather Lake seems to be one of those. Scout Ridge, some people that are doing mushroom hunting out there on some of these more, I guess you would call them these pull off areas, kind of like how it is out west in
Hmm.
Colorado and stuff like that, where you could just pull off of the highway and then try it out for a little while. So there's areas like that where it seems to be pretty promising. And yeah, I'd definitely love to get out there in the near future, man, and do some more research, and actually go out there for that. I do a lot of hiking with my group out this way. We'll lead people from the region on different trials. Getting people exposed to nature, teaching them about plant medicine and just nature in general. What I mean? Some really really good adventures that we go on from here all the way to Michigan. And so I definitely like to go out some more. And I was saying these particular areas that I select. I don't think a lot of people know, but I'm going to put it out there now for the people that's listening that tried with us. I usually choose these particular areas because I've done my research and I find that these are hot spots for activity and stuff
Oh,
like
that's
that. So I
awesome.
have my own personal agenda. You know what I mean? And to bring in
Right.
a little crowd and expose some people to, I guess maybe what's not taught or what's not accepted in society is always of best interest of me, because I love to expose the truth to people and to get them back in tune with nature. So Morgan-Monroe is definitely a place that I'll be looking to go back to in the near future.
Another place you had mentioned when I got your sign up is you had mentioned Turkey Run, and that's actually a place that I visited uh,
Oh
on a
wow.
family trip. This is back in junior high, but I've gone down in those canyons, and it's beautiful. It's a little weird down there, and I don't know. Have you heard the episode about the lady who her and her family went down into Turkey Run, and then pretty much they stepped through the mist and the fog, and there was like a family of Bigfoot, and they were like pretty much frozen in place. They
Oh.
couldn't move for like an hour. It's a wild one. This is a while back. But so I'm curious to hear what you have experienced out there in Turkey Run, because I know a few people have been experiencing stuff out there.
Okay, absolutely. And before I jump into that, I'd like to say that I give thanks to the gentleman. I think he was in episode 953 as well. But he was talking with you about these potential highways, these
Hmm.
forest areas that are interconnected. Turkey Run, Shade State Park. I did some camping down at Raccoon Lake, which is by Lake Waveland. So Turkey Run, Shades, Raccoon Lake. All the other nature preserves that are just west of Indianapolis, and then further south where they connect to Brown County and Morgan-Monroe, all the way down to Mammoth Caves and such. So it seems like to be an interconnected highway that these potential creatures could travel. You know what I mean? And really go unnoticed. I mean, these places are so vast, and the terrain is. is so difficult to traverse. I mean, Turkey Run was like that in general. So I'll go into my Turkey Run experience here. This happened the day after Halloween this year, 2025, so November 1st, which was a Saturday, 2025. And once again, I was leading a group hiking down there, and I chose Turkey Run because I know that it's an area prone to some activity supposedly. So wanted to go down there and really get a change of scenery, change of landscape, as we're just so used to hiking the sand dunes up here and stuff. So we want to get down to some different terrain. So we got down there Saturday afternoon. We had a group of about 5 or 6 people with us, a diverse group. We had guys and girls with us, so it was nice to get out there. And we were hiking. I believe it's Trail One. I don't have the map with me. I was looking for the map the other day when I signed up for this, but I couldn't find the map. But I believe it's Trail One, and this one takes you through the the 176 steps. I think it is those bricks there. I don't know what they are, if they're carved into the landscape or what, but they just look like real old steps, and there are 176 of them. And right before that is the ladders, right? The ladders is where you
Hmm.
climb down into one of the canyons, and that was a pretty neat spot. Um, but yeah, man, we so way before that. This is like right at the beginning of the tribe when we jumped on Trail One. We started traversing through and very neat landscape, these huge uh, rock outcroppings and very steep terrain and stuff like that. So we started trotting through there, and we got down to this spot where it got real tight. Everybody had to and there was a bunch of people on the trail in front of us, so people were just squeezed in trying to get through this tight spot, and we wound up coming off to the left of this trail. If anybody's listening and has been on this trail, try to picture and try to follow where I'm headed. So there's this spot where you can go off to the left, and I don't know, it looks like a little chill spot. People take their dogs maybe back in there and just hang out for a while. But if you crawl up the ridge there a little bit, crawl up on the rocks, you get over to this other side where it's kind of there's a lot of wild ginger over there. If people know what that is, a lot of wild ginger growing right there. And then there's kind of like this little, rock outcropping that's I don't know how you want to call it. If you want to call it a like a canyon, little canyon, and walking right up to there, there's like a little wet, little damp area, or maybe it was wet, from the rain that came a few days before. But I was walking up in there. We all searching around. We were harvesting up some wild ginger and some other things out that way, and I came across what appeared to be a set of footprints, man. And this one, man, I'm telling you, sometimes when you come across things that are really compelling, it'll make your heart jump. You can
Right.
you can be
Oh
a
yeah.
very discernful guy. It'll make your heart jump, man. So
Hmm.
yeah, I seen this and I'm like, this can't be what I'm looking at, man. So I got closer, started investigating before I called out to my other guys that were on the trail with me. But I started checking it out a little more, and you couldn't really make out fine details. Like if you were to do a cast or something, you could really define the details. Or if something were to step in mud or some wet sand and stuff, it really brings out the details. This was in leaf litter, right? So kind of hard to see, and it had the shape of maybe like a 14-inch footprint because it was a few inches bigger than mine, and my boots are a size 11 and a half. So I was saying about 3 or 4 inches bigger than mine. Um, and there was about a 1.5 to 2 foot depression where the toes were in the leaf litter. And I tried to recreate this, right? I tried to get a running start and jump. I'm 145 pounds, and a couple of guys I had with me are buck 80, buck 90. And so we tried to recreate that depression in this leaf litter, and we noticed that we weren't able to do that, even when we came down on our toes, right? But you could definitely tell where the heel was, how it kind of curved out, uh, all the way down to where the toes were, as if something was kind of running through there. So, but yeah, you could see the where the toe impression was on one of the feet, which looked like the right foot. So that's what I could remember in detail was the right foot. It appeared to be, and then what really got me, man, which really what made me say, this may not be a human footprint, is that there was a 6 foot gate in between the steps. So there's a 6 foot stride in between there. And I remember
Yep.
that from, guys talking on your podcast recently. And guys were saying, that's one thing that will always negate it being human activity. Um, you could say what you want about that, but that was my inference coming from that, is that there was that 6 foot stride in there, and there was no other footprints around there that we looked for, and potentially what we inferred is that there was like I said, another little cliff edge right there, and we wound up going up there to get up on top of the ridge, which put us right back near the trail. But something could have potentially jumped up, especially if these creatures are able to jump as high as some people say they do, 10, 15, 20 foot high. It was able to take those 1, 2 steps and then go up. So that was very intriguing as well, out in there. And that's the only encounter I had in there. But the further we pushed along the trail, like I said, we got to the stairs, right? And we traversed up the 176 step staircase, and we got to another spot, and was up harvesting up some there's some pawpaw trees in there. So we're harvesting up some pawpaw leaves and some other mushrooms. I think we found some puffballs and turkey tails we were harvesting up as well. So we came to this other spot. I must have been ahead of the trail, ahead of the guys, down in another spot harvesting up. But my guy Aaron came across what looked like a tree blind, right off of the trail, and he had one or two other guys with him that were hiking with us, and he was able to show them, and they're kind of novice in this, so they're not really sure what to be looking for. So it's cool to bring them out on these trials and kind of work their bush skills up. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so he seen what appeared to be, and we were, like I said, we were out on the trail yesterday when we found that tree bend, me and Aaron. And he brought it up to me when he came across this particular size tree. He was like, "This is what that tree looked like, that I seen, which could have been used for a blind, right on the side of the trail." It was a green tree. The leaves were still green on it, right? It wasn't like it was, the fall time deadfall that was just maneuvered alongside of the trail. It had to have been what I inferenced is about 20 foot around, around the trunk, 20 inches. Um, would be the size of the tree, and maybe about 12 to 15 foot tall is what we could estimate the size of it was. And to him, it looked like it. You would need a couple of people to pick this log up and to move it where it was. And it wasn't a cut log because people, were doing logging down there, obviously. So you could see where the Forest Service was coming in and cutting some of the trees. But it looked like somebody picked this up and set it on side of the trail up against another tree to create this blind. I guess you could say, Mother Nature did it. I guess that's the obvious or the rational, explanation for this. But just the manner that it was placed and where this tree could have come from, because we searched, not me, but they searched around the area and didn't find any spot where this tree potentially matched up to a broken trunk or something that was uprooted. It looked like something that was picked up somewhere out of the bush or broken somewhere out of the bush because it had the splintered edges, right? So something broken, picked up and moved to the side of the trail to lean up against another tree and or bush right there, to kind of get behind and hide. And he said it was about 8 foot tall in total where the blind was stashed. So, I mean, when we start getting to these 8, 9, 10 foot tall anomalies, it really makes
Hmm.
me wonder, if we have to exclude or eliminate, human activity. But nonetheless, it's just a very interesting encounter down there in Turkey Run, and I definitely look to go back to Shade State Park this Friday. I wanted to camp out this week, but I'm looking to go back this Friday, and then camp out potentially the next weekend, which would be the first week of December, so like December 6th and 7th. I want to camp out at Shades.
It's extremely interesting when you combine the info about the blind, especially with finding what looks to be tracks with a 6 foot gate, is extremely compelling. There is an app that you can get if you have a smartphone on you when you go in there, where you can actually scan stuff using your phone camera, so you don't have to. If you don't have casting stuff in with your, like, it wouldn't cast, you can at least try scanning it and seeing a 3D scan, and then you can kind of see a
Wow.
different view of how far down it actually goes into the leaf litter. I think
Do you know
Scaniverse
the name of
is a
this
good
app?
one.
Scaniverse.
Scaniverse is a good one, yeah.
Gotcha.
So
Interesting.
that might be It's been a while since we talked about that one, but that's something you might be able to look at, and listeners, check that out too. At least you have something, if you don't have plaster on you. But yeah, there's so many weird things that have happened in Turkey Run over the years. I'm not surprised really that if you're finding multiple tracks with a 6-foot gate, how many tracks in all do you think you saw there, or the potential of tracks?
Gotcha. There was there was only two definitive ones that we seen, right?
Okay.
And like I said, they were just right in an area where it looked like something could have jumped up on this cliff, or it had the option to keep going straight through the canyon. But we walked up the canyon a little bit more, and it was a little bit sandy underneath that rock outcropping right there. You know how the rocks are down there in Turkey Run. They got like an outcropping sometimes. They go over the edge.
Yeah.
But there wasn't anything in the sandy area right there. There was nothing further ahead that we noticed. You know what I mean? That's not saying that there could have been other evidence there, but we didn't notice anything there. We just noticed what looked like two steps, and potentially steps where, I don't know. This is just a novice inference that potentially, the steps were toe oriented, as the pressure was put on the toes, and that's where most of the depression into the print was on the toe area on both of the tracks, I should say. So, it's a right foot, left foot, and then something used that left foot to jump up and went off into the brush or the tree. Like I said, there's a lot of leaf litter down there, so it's kind of hard to see prints in some of the terrain, especially the harder terrain if you're coming across clay or rocky surfaces. So yeah, nothing more than that, man. And I'm glad you're keeping me on, because it's bringing back other stuff from Turkey Run. So we also came across, and I wound up noticing this with the guys. We were on trail. I want to say this was Trail 9, because Trail 9 is what goes up the 176 steps and continues on. And you could take Trail 10, which flanks all the way around. It does a big loop out by, I forget what the canyon is called, but there's another canyon area over there. And it'll circle back around to Sugar Creek, which is the water system that runs through there. But we wound up taking Trail 9, and we came across this tree. This one was a smaller tree. It had to maybe have been about 4 or 5 inches around, so about that big around. So and that tree was about 10 or 12 foot tall, and maybe taller than that. I'm trying to remember this to the best of my ability. Maybe about 10 plus feet tall. But we noticed a 90-degree break in this tree hanging over the trail, right? So there's a 90-degree break about 8 foot up. And the way that we figured 8 foot is that I'm 5'11", probably 6 foot with my boots on. And so I couldn't even reach the branch with my hands hanging straight up. And so with my hands straight up, that would put me at about, I don't know, close to 7 feet maybe. So it was taller than that. It had to have been a whole nother foot taller than that, man. So, and we all seen that, and we all three said the same thing, was that, man, something had to have been 8 foot tall potentially to grab that and snap that at a 90-degree angle to where it was a clean bend and or break, if you want to call it that. It wasn't like wind damage or a squirrel or a raccoon was hanging onto the tree and it just tipped over and cracked. No, man, this was a 90-degree break in the tree. And what I remember from it is that on the back, only on the inside of the crease. I'm trying to think how to visualize this. Only on the inside of the crease. So this was the bend, the inside of it, right? The inside of it was the only part that was fractured. The outside of it just seemed like it was bent, like rubber almost, right? Or plastic without fracturing. So it was weird. It wasn't just like somebody just cracked it in half. It was almost strategically bent. If you were to bend a steel rod or something like that, copper rod, you could bend it into place. And so that was very interesting as well, very anomalous. We didn't notice anything else around it. And this was a green tree, by the way. We put that out there as well. This was a green tree. It wasn't a dead wood. So nonetheless, another very anomalous thing. And that one happened. Happened after my brethren Aaron found that quote unquote blind that was created by that large tree.
Oh wow! So yeah, pretty. Okay, gotcha. I noticed on the map there is a campground at Turkey Run. If I was out there, sometimes I'll say this. Sometimes if you talk to the camp host, if there's a camp host at a campground and you can get like a conversation going with them, sometimes those guys will have pretty cool stories. because they're staying in that one area for like multiple months. You know what I mean? So
Okay,
might
gotcha.
be,
And let me ask you about this, Jeremiah. What do you
yeah.
think about campgrounds that are like overly crowded? I mean, look at the Turkey Run campground that's over there. When we were driving into the park, I mean that campground, especially for fall time, which is I guess still in season, especially when the weather's nice, was just loaded up, man. It was a really tight campground compared
Okay.
to a Morgan-Monroe where it was very sparse. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Do you think
absolutely. I
those
mean,
areas are still liable?
I would still at least give it a try, see if there's a guy in there that you can talk to, because I mean, I'm guessing there might be some times where it's not packed all the time, and he could still have some stuff to share. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting talking about packed campgrounds versus not packed. I would, just from personal experience out in Iowa, you get a campground where there's not a lot of people out there. You're the only one. You're probably going to have more activity than if it's a packed one. But I'd still see if there's a guy there to talk to. Absolutely. And
Gotcha.
man, if it's an older guy too, one of those dudes that
Oh
are
yeah.
just like, yeah, I got stories and I don't care anymore. That's the best. That's the absolute best. But to Chris, man, I love how you were getting around in the state of Indiana. I remember when you signed up, you also had a story you wanted to share from Bailey, Colorado. Is that right?
Oh yes, yes, man. I'm glad you're bringing this up because some of these things I kind of tuck in the back of my mind is I don't have a lot of people to talk to about this, right? So
Right.
glad you're bringing this one up. So yeah, I'd love to share this last one, and yeah, we'll set the stage, man. So this was 2023, September 2023, and my brother he plays professional rugby, right? So he's traveled around, he's played. He went to Indiana University, played rugby for them, was very prestigious in it, and he was a late bloomer too. We all played high school sports growing up, and he wound up instead of going for football, things got screwed up with that. He wound up going and finding rugby, or rugby found him in a sense. So he started playing that, and that took him on a lot of worldly travels. He played in the MLR down in Houston for the Houston SaberCats for a little time, and then he wound up going to play internationally for the Glendale Raptors. And Glendale is like a little, I guess, neighborhood, if you want to call it, just south of Denver. So he was staying out there, and he was on what came to be the last season for him out there. So he invited me out there before his season wound up starting, and I jumped in the car and we took that 16-hour drive. And he's a road warrior, man. He just drove 16 hours straight all the way through, and I'll give him credit for that. But we made it all the way to Denver, man, and we got into town, and my brother knows that I'm pretty into the Bigfoot stuff or Sasquatch stuff. You know what I mean? So he asked me like, hey, what do you want to do out this way? Well, we got time, and I said I want to hit the mountains, man. I want to go down to Bailey, Colorado, to see the Sasquatch outpost.
Absolutely.
I just found it on the map. You know what I mean? As I was doing my research and looking for places to hike. So long story short, man, we got down to Bailey, Colorado, and had a small breakfast and came in to the Sasquatch outpost. And I wish I could remember the lady's name that was in there, man, because she was such a sweet lady. And if anybody's ever been to the Sasquatch outpost down in Bailey, you probably know the lady that's working the desk that's in there. Real sweet lady and very knowledgeable as well. But we got in there, checked around, and a very neat museum. Want to give a shout out to Jim out there for putting that together, and he's a very knowledgeable guy as well. I wound up running into him after our experience, so that was pretty cool to talk with him and get some more information out of him as well. But we stopped in the outpost, and what I like about the outpost, man, is that they have a map in there, and I'd recommend for even I know that there's not any outposts in Indiana or anything like that, but maybe for some of the researchers, if you're a little more tech savvy or know how to put together maps of sightings and stuff like that, put together a localized map, where you get like a topographical map of the area of Brown County or Morgan-Monroe State Forest or Hoosier National. You know what I mean? Get a map with sightings in there, and kind of what you're doing, Jeremiah. I mean, I'm just piggybacking off of you pretty much, just pinpointing those sightings so that we have some real time maps. I find that a lot of times we do research on sightings and they could be years old, you know what I mean? And who's to say that, stuff is still going on in these places? But
Hmm.
I would like to see people put together a map where we could have these more recent encounters documented for, I guess, the average person passing through to check out. But that's what they did real nice at the outpost. They had a map put together of recent sightings and stuff like that, and some of them were within the past couple of months. You know what I mean? So
Oh
I
yeah.
started talking to this lady. Started talking to the lady at the desk, and she was telling. I was asking questions about encounters and what people experience down here in Bailey, and she was telling me that pretty much everybody has their own encounter or a secondary encounter or story from people in that area, or even just all across the Rocky Mountain region down there. But she was telling me about her own personal one and saying that there was that there was I guess a time where frequently they see red eye shine, if you
Hmm.
want to call it that, and
Yep.
multiple sets. Some will be higher than others. Others will be lower, right? They would have pine cones being thrown as well at their dogs. Their dogs would be barking into the woods, and they know it's not bears, as they are very familiar with bear activity and stuff like that. So, very compelling. Excuse me, very compelling to hear that from individuals out there. And people always talk about. She was one of the ones that say she's had some people, some family members of her talk about, like they call it the mind speak or something like that. Some type of
Sure. Oh yeah.
telekinesis or
Oh yeah.
whatever you
Telepathy,
want to
all that.
associate with
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, so very interesting to hear that from her. But we got into conversation, and I wound up asking her, any recent encounters or any trails with recent encounters close to here, so that we could get a day hike in. And she told us about this this lady and her son. So the lady was a naturalist, and this happened 2 or 3 weeks prior to us coming into town, which was right at the end of berry season. We got in there probably a week or two after berry season was over. We still found some bear berries and stuff like that on the trail, but as far as like salmon berries and wild black caps and blackberries and stuff like that, they were pretty much gone. And she was out there with her son on the Ben Tyler Trail. So if anybody is familiar with Bailey, Colorado, this is about a mile or two up the road in a small town called Shawnee, Colorado. And Shawnee, Colorado is home to the Ben Tyler Trail. And this is just one of those, like I said, Jeremiah, you pull off the side of the highway and hike at your leisure. And you could hike like 15 to 20 miles over the mountaintop to a whole nother city or town, I guess,
Oh
man. And it's
wow.
very desolate, very beautiful location, but the Ben Tyler Trail. And so we wound up taking the lady's word. She was telling us that there was a there was a woman who was a naturalist, right? And she was out there with her young son. He had to have been about 8 or 9. I seen this on Jim's podcast. It's called like Untold Stories or Stories of the something. I forget the exact name. I got the flyer downstairs. I checked it out a couple times and actually seen the episode where this lady came on. But she was talking about 2 or 3 weeks prior to me and my brother getting down there. They hiked about 2 miles up this Ben Tyler Trail, and this is once again a tough trail, man. This is rugged, and there's a lot of switchbacks throughout this trail, and eventually you'll get to this opening where it just opens up, and man, it's so beautiful. The landscape around you is all out. I guess you would call them. There's a lot of pine trees out there, a lot of coniferous trees out there, right? So pines and spruce, and a lot of
Yep.
aspen trees out there. Very beautiful. So we came through that opening. We were looking around and searching the creeks and stuff like that. My brother was into doing cold plunges, ice baths, and stuff like that as part of his recovery. So, we would strip down and jump into these mountainous creeks coming down and just really just invigorate. So it's very beautiful. So we got about 2 miles up the trail to where this lady was talking about. She set up camp with her son, and we found the campsite, man. So that was
Whoa.
very interesting, right off the side of the trail. And there's like a little stream that comes through there. It's a canopied area, kind of a mossy area as well. And she was talking about her and her son was over there, and they was hearing, you know, I guess the typical wood knock throughout the day and stuff like that. And she wound up laying down for sleep with her son. They didn't have no activities throughout the rest of the day, but they lay down for sleep, and they started to hear more wood knocks, and it sounded like that they were closer and coming from opposite sides of each other. And I guess during the middle of the night, they heard something run into camp. They did. The lady thought she was dreaming, um, so she kind of just brushed it off. But the son wound up having some dreams about it, and I think she wound up having some type of otherworldly dreams, man. And they wound up waking up in the morning time, and they got out the tent to check it out. She was asking her son if they heard anything and this, that, and the other. And her son looked around the camp and they wound up finding a Class A footprint, man. And they took a picture of that. Um, I guess for my eyes, because my eyes are a little bit more novice than others who have been doing this
Hmm.
for some time, I wasn't really able to see the footprints so well, but you could definitely see where there was some toe prints in the mossy uh, landscape close to the creek. We didn't see anything when we tried it in there to check it out, but I just found it real interesting how this is going to lead up to what me and my brother wound up experiencing up there. So we found that campsite, and it was cool to check it out and correlate this lady's story. And so we started trotting a little bit more up the trail, and probably about another quarter mile up the trail, before we came into this aspen tree area, we were just on the outskirts of it, and we came across this this little damp area on the trail, and we all of a sudden we just picked up this scent. My brother was in front of me on the trail. We picked up this scent, which was like this boggy scent. It's kind of like a swampy scent, and I've smelled this as of recent, especially yesterday trotting along the Calumet River and just smelling the swampiness of it. All the it was weird. It's a scent that I wasn't all too familiar with at the time. But we smelled this swampy scent, man, and the wind was blowing, so obviously it could have been blown into us from somewhere or it was permeating from somewhere around us. But immediately I looked down and I thought it was the damp area that we were trotting on or that I was standing on top of. So I got down to the ground and I started smelling the ground, you know what I mean, and checking it out, trying to pick up a scent. And that didn't smell nothing like it. It just smelled like wet dirt, or wet soil, you know what I mean? Which has an earthy scent to it, not a
Right.
swampy or a boggy scent. And what was cool is me and my brother both picked up on this scent, man. And he had to been about 10 foot in front of me, and both of us stopped in our tracks because the scent was pungent enough to stop us, I guess you'd say. But we picked it up and we stopped and we were quiet the whole time, listening and looking around. And we didn't hear anything right away, and we didn't notice anything. But we continued trotting up the trail, and the scent was gone. And when we come back through this particular spot, like we didn't just keep on going. We did a little research, I guess you'd say, in this particular location. So we went back and forth, and we would smell it just in this particular area, man. And it wasn't behind us, it wasn't in front of us, it was right here. And so after some time spent trying to debunk it, we couldn't conclude anything, so we continued to trot, and that's when we heard that typical wood knock sound, man. From from it had to have been about 50 to 100 yards out, about my 7 o'clock position. My brother was behind me at this time, as I had went ahead of him, so he was behind me at about 6 o'clock, and this was at about my 7 or 8 o'clock position, right? Yeah, 7 or 8 o'clock, and we heard this classic wood knock. It was just one, but it was pretty. It had to have been pretty close, man, because it was a
Wow.
pretty good sound knock. But it was that pop, that
Yep.
popping noise, that
Yep.
popping wood knock, man. And we heard that, and my brother looked at me. I looked back, and my brother looked at me, and I was like, yeah, "You hear that, man?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I heard that, man. No doubt about it." And we continued on, man, and we wound up not experiencing anything else. I mean, we got up to the trailhead where you can continue on and go over the top of the mountain. Like I said, it's really steep, man. You continue going on top over the mountain, or you got to turn back. And we wanted to turn back because we were losing daylight and we didn't have any headlamps or anything. So we just continued to trot back, and it was interesting when we came back through that spot, that same exact spot, because we had landmarked it. We came back through that spot down the trail, and we didn't notice any scent there, man. And I got down on the ground again, smelt the ground,
Oh,
went through the same
wow.
procedures, and this was right in the very near vicinity of that lady's encounter at that bush campsite, right? So very very interesting, man. And I mean, you could say that we saw other stuff that like rock stacking and stuff like that. But I mean, people trod this trail. It's not like people don't trot it, but it's kind of like a an advanced trail, intermediate slash advanced trail. So you're not going to get, I don't know if maybe it's kind of biased of me to say, but you're not going to get your average person coming up in there to stack up rocks and stuff like that, right? Or maybe they could, but it was interesting seeing some things like that. We didn't notice any tree breaks and stuff, as this was my first true encounter, if you
Right.
will, or experience. Um,
Cool.
but it was just cool to document that. So I guess that answers the original question that you asked me at the beginning of this interview. What really got me into this? And besides me, being just infatuated with something out there of unknown origin, that's what really solidified it for me. And it's like I caught the bug, man. You know what I mean? I can't get this stuff out of my head, and I wish I had more people to research and talk with, and I wish I had more time to go out and research. You know what I mean? So I try to dedicate every weekend to getting out to a new spot.
What a fascinating journey you have gone on, because that really brings it, full circle. You went back to your first time there, but have you ever looked into? I want to say there's a newer Bigfoot conference that takes place in Indiana now. You may want
I'm
to
not
look
too sure
into
of
it.
it.
Yeah.
Is it hosted by the guy? What's his name? Something Nail.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, yeah. I think he's involved with it. But that would be a great way for you to try to get some connections with other researchers in the area, if
Right
that's
on.
what you were trying to look into. But it seems like you have some great people already that are willing to go out with you and look as well. But Chris, this has been a fascinating conversation. I mean, it is wild how many different things are starting to come out of Indiana. It's very cool. And as you said, I mean, we didn't even really talk about the Hoosier National Forest, and it's southern Indiana has got stuff going on too. But I think
Wow.
where you're focusing, that Morgan-Monroe, and like, man, that's pretty cool. Definitely keep me in the loop with what's going on there. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on, Chris, for sharing your account so far, and it'll be fun to see where this takes you in the future. And I believe you had given me your email as well. If people want to reach out to you, we can put that in the description of the episode so people can drop you a line if they have any questions, or maybe if they have stuff to report about that area of Indiana. So
Absolutely. I'd love to be in contact with with anybody that's partaking in research around the way. I'd love to share experiences and share methods, so that we can tighten up our skills. You know, as they say, iron sharpens iron, man. So the more that we can help each other out, instead of being caught up in this, disproving this person or bashing that person, let's get some camaraderie going, man.
Chris, thank you so
Absolutely.
much for coming on, man.
Absolutely. And lastly, before I go, I got to give a shout out to the Ancient Mystics, man. That's my
Oh
crew right
yeah.
there, the Ancient Mystics. Ancient Mystics All Natural Products, the Elder Lord Cassius D, my brethren Woodstone the Messenger, my brethren Chef Aaron L, the Rebel Chef, Carl the Spoon Weatherspoon, and our other elder sister Nancy Knightley Bones. So we give thanks, and we're going to continue trotting out there and doing all the righteous work for humanity and for many peoples as long as we're on this planet, my brother.
Fantastic.